How's it going, YouTube? My name is LBNinja7, your favorite WoW healing content creator. And guys, we have finally received some buffs, some nerfs, some healer tuning after the Race of the World First. If you're kind of new to the game or you just don't really pay attention to these things, they usually don't tend to buff or nerf things a lot during the Race of the World First, just to keep things fair. So a lot of times there are some pretty unbalanced things that kind of make it into the game or slip through, but then they get the hammer after Race the World First, and that's kind of happened. That kind of has happened because there were some balancing issues, and we've heard a lot about this. I'm sure you have seen some classes get discussed more than others, because there are some classes that did need to get nerfed. There are some classes that did need to get buffed. So first off, let's go and talk about why that is. And right here, this is a raid performance. It's very loose. It's all percentiles. So just you can see that the bottom end versus the top end, the outliers, and there's clear winners. There's clear winners when you look at a graph like this. But then when you look at the Race World First comps, there are also clear winners in that as well. What do I mean by that? There are just some classes that were just picked over others in almost every single comp, like Disc Priest. Their insane damage profile for a healer, their insane ramp profile to deal with very heavy mechanics or overlapping mechanics. Same with Mistweaver, solid healer damage, but for the most part, just through the roof throughput if played correctly. Very good mana management, unlike Resto Shaman, who I've heard a lot of complaints about that they are struggling in the mana category, but if not, they can heal a ton. They can perform very well. And for the most part, the rest was pretty balanced, except for this outlier, Holy Priest. Their throughput is pretty low. However, you still were, seeing some Holy Priests make it into the Race World First comps, just because they have sneaky good raid utility. They are excellent raid utility healers. It's just this throughput number is still very surprising, very shocking when compared to something like us Mistweavers. I can't complain. I see the numbers. Trust me, we're going to get into it. So let's just kick things off going through the lists of nerfs, and we're going to start off with Restoration Druid. Now, I've talked about raid and kind of the Race World First, but something that always happens alongside that is Mythic Plus. And Mythic Plus, if you remember, Resto Druids did see a huge buff to their cat damage. So when they're in cat form, a lot of people call it cat weaving because they weave in and out of their druid form and their cat form during downtime, where they can apply their hots, summon their little treants, and then let that healing cover the damage incoming, and then swap into cat form and just blast damage. Use Convoke. They can apply a bunch of dots, get big ferocious bites off, and extend those dots with the Maldraxxus Covenant ability. Now, I remember back when the Maldraxxus ability kind of took off back in Shadowlands, which I'll go ahead and pull it up here, is Adaptive's form. I had totally forgotten this name of this ability, but it does really well with cat weaving because they were already taking this. It's basically just a dot, but how it works is it makes all of your other dots more effective. And one thing about cat weaving is you have things like Rip, you have things like Rake, you have things like Thrash. So you can apply all three of these dots onto an enemy. This is one of your spenders, so you have to use all of your combo points to use it. But you can apply these three dots. You can apply your Moonfire and your Sunfire and have so many dots on an enemy that they're just going to be melting it. Help their boss damage. Having Thrash, having improved Sunfire helps their AoE damage. And all these buffs to these dots and even Ferocious Bite just kind of push them over the edge in terms of healer damage in a Mythic Plus environment. And one thing that we just know is as much as they don't want, and they being Blizzard, don't want healer damage to be like a main priority in terms of who is the meta healer in Mythic Plus. The fact is, when you're racing versus a clock and you need to do a certain amount of damage, a certain amount of HP worth of enemies in a certain amount of time, damage will just always matter. Unless they remove all the damage from all the healer abilities, just make us do soul healing, then healer damage will matter. Their damage was just very good. So coming back to the list of nerfs, we look at Druid, Restoration Druid. All these nerfs are to their cat weaving abilities. And one thing about cat weaving, if you've never played it before, or maybe you're thinking about playing it, I would highly advise, one, especially since it got nerfed, don't jump into it. Don't. Because I played this back in Shadowlands, and my hands have never been more sore the amount of times you have to bounce between forms, the amount of dots that you have to upkeep, so the amount of buttons per second that you're pressing, or per minute, I guess, is like through the roof. You have to press buttons constantly. So seeing these nerfs, I don't know. I don't like when one healer does way more damage than the rest of the healers, but I don't think it was like too egregious. I think Druid's healing isn't like as insane, so it kind of counteracts with the damage that they were doing. However, in a world where we have two healers that are literally battle healers in Disc Priest and Mistweaver, it makes more sense that they do the most damage and sacrifice more healing. So if they did less healing but did, you know, shit tons of damage, that would be cool. But having Druids do the most damage, it is weird, albeit this playstyle just does take a high skill cap. So I still expect to see some Resto Druids playing at the top end. I don't think that your casual Resto Druid, this will affect you literally at all. But if you're just pushing like upwards to 24s, you're chilling. You're chilling, still play Druid. But if you're pushing anything higher than that, this will probably just affect you. People might not take you in groups anymore. It's going to take some time to see how much these nerfs really affect your overall damage. But for the most part, it doesn't look that bad, given that you saw like 140% buffs coming into this tier. So all in all, Druids are chilling. It's kind of shocking that their healing did not see too many buffs for raid. I think they're still going to give it a few weeks and see how these nerfs kind of bring Mistweavers down toward the rest of them. And we'll get to the Holy Priest buffs. They might scoot back up. Everyone will probably be more in line. However, with Resto Druids, you do like to see them kind of performing up here with Mistweaver, since they don't bring super great utility like the Priest specs, like Holy Paladins. You know, you want them to perform a little better in terms of throughput. Now, for you Evoker fans, you guys did not get touched. Now, I was a huge Evoker believer. I was also a big Resto Shaman believer, so I'm happy to see Resto Shamans performing well, but Evokers are performing fine. It's not bad. Their cooldowns are still very good. Their healing profile is still pretty good for these fights that we're seeing, but we just had some outliers in the throughput department. We had some clear comps that were just more meta, so you just didn't see Preservation Evokers. So I think the reason why we're not seeing any buffs, any nerfs for Preservation Evokers is like the same for Resto Druid. Once the King Mistweavers come down a little bit, I think we will see those healers start to scoot up in popularity a bit. So good on them for not touching Evokers. I'm excited to see how that affects meta, because they are still very solid healers. We're going to skip monks, because you guys know I could talk about monks all day, but let's go and get these guys through. So Holy Paladins, honestly, any amount of buffs that they receive now is good. That means that the Holy Paladin summer, you know, got crushed, and they got nerfed about 10,000 times in a row. I wasn't counting, but it felt like that. But now they're receiving buffs. But if you've played Holy Paladin, or if you have one in your guild, you'll notice they just don't press Crusader Strike anymore. They get most of their holy power from their casts, which is weird. It feels very backwards, and I couldn't imagine playing Holy Paladin myself. And I have not played it since that was like the main playstyle. But buffing Crusader Strike, although it still really doesn't have any healing value unless you take, I think it's called Avenging Wrath or Avenging Crusader, one of those two that kind of makes you into a Mistweaver for a few seconds, then the damage that this does not really matter in the grand scheme of a raid. This damage buff really does matter in the grand scheme of Mythic Plus. And if we look here for the Mythic Plus, you only see one Paladin in the top 15. Yeah, you see a couple more in the top 20, but they're a lot less you know, frequent. You don't see Paladins. It's not 10.1.7 anymore. You just don't see them as much as you'll see Disc Priests or Resto Druids in the top. And that's good. The damage, it's not good that they're not seen. It's good that they're seeing damage buffs, because that will help. And even if the slightest amount, it'll help their M+ performance. And same for Hammer of Wrath, which is like their execute. And both of these, like I said, they can have healing value, so that the damage that they do can scale into their healing. So it's good to see these damage buffs, but more importantly, their mana kind of got tweaked a bit. Now, it looks like a small change in mana, this 1% down to 0.6%. But if you're a Holy Paladin, you know that you've kind of been struggling. I've been hearing a lot of Holy Paladins complaining that now their mana is like really hard to manage. The Daybreak changes kind of just messed them up a bit. And I've heard that it's been pretty bad for them, especially in Mythic Plus. I've heard that some Paladins don't have to drink ever, but some Paladins are feeling that they have to drink after every single pool. But this will help, because Crusader Strike and Mythic Plus, you at least press that on cooldown, basically, to get your Holy Power generation. So seeing that reduction is gonna be huge. Now, my question is, they're swinging a sword and it costs mana. Okay, if you followed my channel, I've said in the past with Mistweaver, we literally kick. We do the same kick that a Windwalker does, except ours costs mana. Just take the mana cost off of it. If it's 0.6, at what point does throwing a hammer not cost mana? I just don't get it. I get that, yes, they do have healing value. They have magical powers and the fact that they generate a holy power, but just take the mana off these abilities. But Rising Sun Kick, Spinning Crane Kick, how does that cost mana? I just don't get it. But all in all, good. I think their throughput is fine. For the most part, they're doing solid throughput for what a Holy Paladin is. They bring a lot of utility to a raid environment. So to see them just get slight buffs to things that will not like blow them out in the meta for raid, like this will not make them super meta in raid. I think that is good. A big thumbs up. I think Holy Paladins can start to kind of take a breath of relief. Your nerf season is over. Let's get you guys back to a good spot. And I totally agree. Now, Disc Priest is up there with how much damage they do, how much healing they do, since a lot of their healing, most of their healing comes off of their atonement buffs. You buff your allies with atonement, and then your damage funnels healing based on how much damage you're doing. Now, your healing, though, like I said, a lot of your healing is based on that multiplier. Which, if you look here, it's atonement. It does 40% of all the damage that you do to your target is going to be converted into healing. So when you nerf your healing, you're just nerfing your spells like your Flash Heal, your Power Word Radiance. I don't believe this actually nerfs Atonement in any way. The only way that they're nerfing Atonement is by nerfing their damage as well. Now, yes, this is a pretty big healing nerf. It's weird. Nerfing their damage is a very big healing nerf, but I do think it was pretty necessary because, like I said earlier, they're performing very well up there with Resto Druids in the amount of damage they do in a Mythic Plus environment, and they're performing pretty well. It doesn't show here on this graph, but they're performing very well at the top highest level in a raid environment. A lot of that is because of their damage, and that converts thus into their healing. But this healing reduction is like so weird. I don't know, maybe someone can explain it to me in the comments, but I don't think that was necessary. Maybe nerf their damage by like 4%, don't touch their healing, because you know, if you've ever played Discipline Priest, you know if you're casting something like Flash of Light, you're already in a bad spot. If you're penancing your tank, you're in a horrible spot. So all in all, very confusing healing reduction, unless that does also hit Atonement, but I don't think it does. I really do not think it does. But yeah, just very big question mark here. The damage reduction, pretty good nerf. I hate to say it, you're going to hear me say it when we get to the Mistweaver part. A lot of these nerfs, as a healer, I feel for you guys that play these specs, and I hate it, but a lot of it is good. A lot of it is good, I promise. It's healthy for the meta, which I know meta is a term that a lot of people hate, but it's just healthy for the overall player base, and this is one of those nerfs. But you will hear me talk about that when we get up here to Mistweavers. But next up, we have Holy Priests. Now, you guys saw their healing was pretty abysmal when you just look at throughput. Like I said, this does not mean everything in terms of what healers are meta. However, this is pretty bad. Like, you could bring all the utility in the world, but doing this much less healing than all the other healers is pretty bad. Like a 65th median versus like an 83, like 82. That's pretty bad. So I'm so happy that Holy Priest is getting a healing increase. This will also help their Mythic Plus performance, along with these other buffs. Burning Vehemence, I don't know, now causes Holy Fire to deal 75% of its initial damage to nearby enemies instead of 60%. That'll help their damage in Mythic Plus, especially. But the big buff here is a buff to their 2-piece. So your holy words will apply renews to whoever you're hitting, but now your serenity, now the renew that you're applying now lasts 18 seconds instead of 14 seconds. So when you spot heal someone, you're applying a longer renew, and that's just more healing. It's more of a hot, a longer lasting hot, which is great. And then your sanctify, your AoE ground circle, now lasts 6 seconds instead of 5 seconds. Now, this is not just a buff to the 2 set. It's also a major buff to the 4 set. If you know anything about the 4 set, your renew ticks have a chance to make these spells not go on cooldown when you press them. So it's a big buff because you're just gonna have more renew casts out in a raid environment. So all in all, pretty good changes to Holy Priest. If you're a Holy Priest, I want to party with you guys. You guys are rejoicing right now. These are pretty good changes. I don't know how this stacked on top of this buff will push you in terms of throughput, but it should balance you out more. So all in all, very solid change, but it is kind of weird. I will admit it is weird having like a chance of your 4 set. Like your 4 set literally has no value if it doesn't proc. So hopefully just procking more often will give it more value. And I will say it's hard to balance those kind of things, those chance procky type things. But I think this is a good way. You're buffing the guaranteed value that your tier set gives. So all in all, pretty good buffs. I'll give this a thumbs up as well. Now, when it comes to shamans are so weird. I feel like my heart goes out to the dev team because shamans look so difficult to balance. They're either broken and played a lot or they're not good at all. But right now we're actually kind of in like the golden era of they're really good, but still like not being a meta healer. I mean, you look at this, their healing is very high. Their tier set gives a lot of healing, chain heals, slapping, like just all their healing sources are like chef's kiss right now. In fact, it makes me want to play Resto Shaman, especially in raid. I love Resto Shaman in raid. Like I love playing it. But their mana looks horrible, and it sucks that chain heal is not what sees a mana reduction. I still am on the team that chain heal costs way too much mana, but any amount of mana reduction across any healer is such a good thing. All the healers right now, like it feels like every healer is fighting over innervates, fighting over sources of magic. It just sucks to be a healer right now because it's not fun playing a healer that doesn't do good throughput. Like I'll admit it, it's not fun to play this healer. It's much more fun to play this healer when you're just looking at a chart. But the one thing that any healer can agree on is it's especially not fun to play a healer that struggles with mana. Because when you're at 0 mana, you literally cannot play the game. So any amount of healing or mana reduction across any healer is good, especially Shaman. They really struggle, and I don't want my Shaman that we just recruited to take my innervates, even though I literally don't get them. So this is a thumbs up. They needed it. Good for you guys. Chain Lightning, their AoE damage in Mythic Plus, getting a slight buff. Same with Acid Rain. Not only is this good AoE damage in, well, hopefully now it's good AoE damage in Mythic Plus, but it's also good sustained damage in raid. Like you keep your healing rain flowing on melee as much as you can. You want this uptime as good as possible. So it kind of acts like a Moonfire, like a Druid's Moonfire. The more damage does, the better, because you just reapply it once it falls off and you just get passive damage. That's all Acid Rain is in a raid environment. But in Mythic Plus, they've really monitored this damage that it does in a Mythic Plus environment. But right now, I am so happy that it's seeing a buff. This is, to me, one of the coolest talents in the game. I love Acid Rain. I loved it when it was a Torghast power. So a 10% buff, I'll take it. But for me to play Shaman and Mythic Plus, this would have to see a big buff. Obviously, I just it would take a lot to get me off Mistweaver. But Acid Rain is one of the things that I am a big fan of, and it could push me that way. But a 10% buff, I'm excited to see if this pushes them in the Mythic Plus meta, because you see here they are basically non-existent. But I just don't think that these buffs are big enough to push them up in the meta. Up there with the Disc Priests, up there with the Mistweavers, the Resto Druids. But time will tell. Chain Lightning getting a 20% increase is actually pretty big, because you do pull a lot of like 5-pack enemies. There are a lot of like 3-pack or 3 enemy packs in dungeons nowadays. So Chain Lightning getting a buff is actually going to be pretty big. So I'm excited to see where this puts shamans. I wish, as someone who wants to play shaman more but hates the mana management that they have, I wish they would see more mana reductions, because almost 5% of your mana for a healing surge is wild, but still 4.4% is still pretty wild, but it's better. We take it. Thumbs up. But I want to see more in the mana department. I don't like seeing shaman struggle with mana. I don't think that makes shaman fun. And when shamans are just not seeing much play at the top end, that trickles down a lot. And I think part of that is because their mana management. Other healers can accomplish what they're doing with better mana management, like Mistweavers, Disc Priest, even Resto Druids could even do what Resto Shamans do. So all in all, thumbs up. But yeah, I think it might take a little more to bring them more in line in Mythic Plus. But as far as their throughput's going, but as far as raid throughput, I mean, they're looking pretty solid. They're looking to be a front runner, especially after the Mistweaver nerfs. Which, speaking of Mistweaver nerfs, it's time. It's time that we talk about Mistweavers. Now, we knew Mistweaver was going to get nerfed. I especially knew it was going to get nerfed. They're performing pretty well in Mythic Plus. They're up there like top 3 maybe in Mythic Plus. In Raid, they're a clear throughput powerhouse. Also, it goes without saying that Mistweavers or monks in general bring a lot to Raid environment. They bring big healing buffs to the whole group or to anyone standing near them. They have probably the most raid buffs of any class. So monks are already pretty mandatory in the raid. And to see Mistweaver monks perform this well will kind of just make them be pretty top of the meta, because this is kind of unreal. Now, a lot of their healing does come from Vivify Cleave still, even though that's seen a pretty big nerf coming into 10.2. But a lot of their surprise healing has come from Essence Font. They buffed Essence Font recently, so Essence Font is performing pretty well. Let's look at Vor's log. His second highest cast is Essence Font, but you look at the cast that he did, he only cast it 8 times. But it does like really good healing when you let it swell up with upwelling, and it becomes very efficient when you cut its 18,000 mana cost in half with Mana Tea. And like I said, it becomes more efficient with upwelling, and then it becomes even more efficient when you Thunder Focus Tea cast it, which is what he does, what all the Mistweavers are doing right now. So it comes out twice as fast, does way more healing, is twice as mana efficient. So it's just a very solid button, does a lot of AoE throughput. So that is unfortunately seeing pretty heavy nerfs. So Essence Font healing is decreased as a whole by 10%. Upwelling as well, which is the talent that makes it swell up the longer you let it sit on cooldown, it now only stacks up to 15 times. This becomes kind of awkward because, like I said, you pair this with your 30-second cooldown of Thunder Focus Tea, which it timed out pretty well. When it got to 18 stacks, your Thunder Focus Tea was off cooldown, and then you would pop it once every 30 seconds, roughly. So it kind of sucks that it only stacks up to 15 times now. This also does take some power off the top. But as you see, with 8 casts doing 9% of your healing, and it's not a lot of it goes into overhealing, it's just such a powerful button. So taking some power off of it makes sense. I hate it, but it makes sense. We were expecting Essence Font to see some pretty good nerfs. Nerfing Upwelling to me is what's shocking. I would have rather seen like an Essence Font nerf by like 15%. But all in all, like I said, we saw these nerfs coming. So the fact that they're, not the worst things in the world, we'll take it. We'll take it. That's not the end of the world. Now, let's talk about Invigorating Mist. Invigorating Mist is the top healing source. You look at Vivify. How it works is you Vivify one target, and then anyone that has this hot on them, Renewing Mist, you'll cleave those Vivifies for a small amount onto them. And that's what Invigorating Mist is. So if you look at their a healing breakdown of a Mistweaver, you see Vivify, you don't see Invigorating Mist at all. It's because you have to click this drop down. Invigorating Mist does a lot of healing. You cast Vivifies, they're always going to cleave on anyone with Renewing Mist for a reduced value based on how many Renewing Mists you have out. This is why the ramp is so good, because you ramp up your Yulon. You get all the buffs on everyone with enveloping breath, but you apply a bunch of renewing mists out while you're doing that, and then you just spam vivifies, and you can kind of counteract massive amounts of damage with this combo. So you see here, it is 10%. Invigorating Mist on this specific log is 10% of his healing, 10.17. So that is his highest healing source. So our two highest healing sources getting nerfed, it hurts a lot, but it's not the end of the world. Once again, it's a 10% nerf. A 10% nerf of 10% of your healing is about a 1% overall nerf, just doing the most rough math possible. So don't take that and run with it. But overall, it sucks. It makes our Vivifies less efficient in healing, making them less mana efficient, making them just overall less efficient. So it sucks. Essence Font getting nerfed sucks, but we adapt. We were doing so much throughput that I think we're going to survive this. We're going to be fine. Still probably meta because, like I said, every raid needs a monk. By now, one of your healers is probably re-rolled monk to fill that role. So Mistweaver will still perform, hopefully we land around Resto Shaman in terms of our throughput. Hopefully still a little bit above them. I think we can. But moving on to the nerfs, or to the rest of the nerfs, Calming Coalescence is a talent that basically every time you channel your Soothing Mist into someone, you're just going to be stacking this up. You can get up to 50 stacks, and it buffs your next Life Cocoon. Now, if you fully stack this, which usually you do this before pool, so you come into the pool with your first Life Cocoon being buffed by 150%, it makes that Life Cocoon absolutely massive. It makes it probably, I've heard some tanks say that it becomes the best tank defensive in the game when it's fully stacked in a raid environment. And in a Mythic Plus environment, it is a little different. But also this just absolutely like tripled health bars of DPS players. Not necessarily tripled, but it made them to where they can survive a lot of mechanics. So seeing this nerfed, this will, funnily enough, hurt our parses, which I know it's stupid to care about, but a lot of people, like I said, we were stacking up our first Life Cocoon so that it absolutely chunked, and did like massive healing on our first Life Cocoon. So it's gonna suck because our throughput numbers will be hit by this, unfortunately, but for the most part it was just like a massive shield. So seeing this nerfed, like I said, we can survive this nerf. It's not the worst thing in the world. If anything, it was probably because of the amount of utility that it now gave tanks. They could survive huge tank hits now. But this is in no means going to gut this talent. Maybe we just, swerve around this talent. But for the most part, this nerf is not the end of the world. Now, we are seeing a compensation buff. 2, in fact. Vivify's primary healing is increased by 5%. So we go back to Vor's log. We look at how much healing Vivify does. We split it into Invigorating Mist and Vivify. Seeing a 5% buff to a 5.5% heal of your overall healing is not a lot at all. So this compensation buff is comedic. Okay, look, I'll say it. Taking a lot of power from our AoE heal and just distributing a tiny amount into a spot heal is just upsetting. But I guess we'll take it. What are we going to do? I mean, what can we say? Blizzard's made the decision. That's pretty upsetting. And then finally, Ancient Concordance now increases the chance for Blackout Kick to reset Rising Sun Kick by now 12%, was 10%. So if you're on your Fey line and you Blackout Kick, it now has an increased chance to reset Rising Sun Kick by a larger amount. So all in all, great if you plan to play like an Ancient Teachings build or a Phalanx build with Ancient Concordance and Raid, which a lot of times you don't stem all the way down to Ancient Concordance. You just take the single point Phalanx. But all in all, this could be a buff for that. You're going to see more funnel damage, which your Rising Sun Kick is great in a raid environment because it does the most healing and it applies a renewing mist. So it just sets you up, sets your ramps up further, makes your Vivifies hit more targets. So all in all, great change in terms of raid, like fist weaving, the fist weaving quote build. However, no one, like I said, takes Ancient Concordance. Maybe they just want you to, put more points down in the tree. I don't know, but you know what? For a Mythic Plus player, this is pretty good. It'll help your boss damage pretty nicely because you're going to see more Rising Sun Kicks versus bosses. It'll help your renewing miss count stay high because you're going to Rising Sun Kick more often. So all in all, a nice change, albeit it looks small. It's a nice change. Like I said, any buff is a good buff. It's just a little weird. It's pretty weird. I do think they're trying to even out the playstyles even more, but nerfing Essence Font does also nerf the Gingi Ancient Teachings build. So I still don't think you're going to see people taking that build and parsing very well with it. But me, someone who loves that playstyle, I'll still whip it out every now and then, especially in a heroic raid. Now, I skipped over the Mana Tea nerf. Because it makes me want to cry. Look, this hurts probably, in my opinion, more than all the other nerfs, just because me specifically, I don't get any innervates in my group. We only have like 2 druids. One of them is a Resto Druid, so they're innervating themselves. And then we have a Disc Priest who just gets the other innervate. So I am on my own in terms of mana. Sometimes I can, you know, spend 50,000 gold to get a source of magic, but for the most part, I am on my own. And my mana struggles. You see here, this is a bad pool because I did dip down to 50% in 45 seconds. Horrible management on my part. But I still just am drowning at the end of like every single fight because I don't have any help. It's just my Mana Teas helping me out, and I'm still practicing that. But any nerf is a big nerf to our mana. So Mana Tea now reduces the mana cost of spells by 25% instead of 50%. So you're still going to get the same mana return. Your health or your mana bar will bounce up the same amount whenever you sip your tea. The problem is that buff that lingers on you for the amount of seconds of the amount of charges you consume will be cut in half. So all this flattening that happens after my Mana Teas will be lessened. I will decrease more than I am here because I just will have half of that buff, and that is pretty gutting because you see here it's very easy to manage your mana once you have that buff. Every single time my mana bar flattens and even goes up here. It even goes up. So I mean, it just hurts, guys. This does hurt. And like I said earlier in the video, nerfing a healer's mana doesn't just nerf how much throughput they can do, doesn't nerf, or it nerfs a lot of things, but mostly it nerfs the fun. It nerfs the fun, and I know a lot of people hate when I mention fun when I talk about balancing or tuning, but having a healer be at 0 mana is like putting like doubling the global cooldown between all the DPS's casts. Like imagine playing like Balanced Druid, but you have a 2-second global cooldown between each Wrath. Or like you're playing Windwalker Monk and your Rising Sun Kick costs all 5 of your chi, or all 6 of them if you take that talent. Imagine that. It's just not fun because you're straining your resources and limiting the amount of healing that they can do in that way. And that is just not, in my opinion, in the opinion of a lot of other people. Go watch MadSkillzz video that he just put out on this. He talks about this same topic. Mana being the limiting resource is not fun. It just is not. And this is just gutting. It makes Innervate now be mandatory on Mistweavers, be mandatory on the Resto Druids. They're going to be soaking up their own Innervates if you play with one like mine. Disc Priests need Innervate. Shamans need Innervate. It's just like, guys, come on. We only have one Balanced Druid in our raid. What do? We don't have a Balanced Druid in our raid. What do? You cry. That's what you do. And man, I hate to see this one. Hopefully they revert it because it has been such a blast playing with Mana Tea. But yeah, I guess we're going to be seeing a lot more of this, or at least I personally, for this first week, until I get used to it, until I get a lot of reps in and practice with new Mana Tea and having to manage my mana a lot better than this, I'm going to swap builds and try out other things because this I don't want to be doing in more mythic fights. It's just bad. Like I said, this was poor on my part. But for the rest of it, I kind of was like, okay, I need to chill on the mana. And I started to drown, even with playing it well. I played the rest of this fight pretty well in terms of mana management. So all in all, look, we knew these nerfs were coming. We knew something was going to get nerfed. We knew it was probably going to be Essence Font. I was hoping it wouldn't be Invigorating Mist again. Huge frowny face there. I would have hoped that it would have just been Essence Font. But my hope for this is that now Essence Font and Upwelling are not mandatory anymore. Hopefully, I guess time will tell with logs and parses and letting people like Vor do the math for us, basically. Hopefully, Essence Font doesn't become as mandatory because of how much mana it costs. Because it costs 18,000. With the old Mana Tea, it costs 9,000, and then now it's going to cost, if you have Mana Tea buff, it's going to cost like what, 13,500. Still a ton of mana, and I think Yulon costs 12,500. So with Mana Tea, it used to cost like 6,250. Now it's going to cost, oh god, I should not do math, 9,375, I think. So still just huge implications with this mana cost reduction being nerfed. But yeah, like I said, the rest of these changes are not horrible. Man, stop hitting Invigorating Mist if you ask me. But that's just me. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully it didn't come off as too complaining. I just wanted to go over the buffs and nerfs. I know you've seen a lot of other healer YouTubers make a video similar to this and kind of just talk more about the overall implications, but I did kind of want to put some opinions in this video. I don't do that often. I usually try to stay pretty opinion free, pretty unbiased, or I try my hardest to be. But guys, I don't know, when my class is the one getting nerfed, I feel like I can be a little opinionated. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I know it's different from what I usually the stance I try to take in my videos. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Huge shout out to my Patreons. Thank you guys so much. If your name is on the screen, you are allowing me, a person, just a random person, to live out their dream of being a full-time YouTuber. So thank you guys so much. And if you, yes, you want to see your name on this list and help me out like they are, check out the link down in the description below. But don't feel pressured, because there are plenty of other ways to help out the channel, like subscribing. I am so close to 5K subscribers. It will be like a massive milestone, so make sure you're subscribed. Also, like this video if you liked it, and comment down below what you guys think. That also helps me out a ton. Guys, I've talked enough. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Until then, take care.